Welcome to the Design Thinker podcast, where we explore the theory and practice of design. Hosted by me, Donnie, and
me, Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Hello, Danny. How are you today?
Good. Excited about our trip today?
Me too. Looking forward to it as ever, but this one, for some reason, especially looking forward to.
Nice. So what are we talking about?
Well, today we are talking about emotions. What are they good for anyway?
I feel like it's like a Dolly Parton song or something.
Could be. Over to you. You can sing us, you can do the outro. You can sing us a Dolly Parton style outro to this podcast.
Okay, we're trying to build and keep our listeners, not scare them away.
Okay.
So I won't sing.
Okay. Stay with us, listener.
So usually we start with a definition.
Yes, and I've been thinking about this episode for a few days, and I definitely think we should start with the definition. Let's anchor it in something.
Okay. What do we mean when we say emotion?
I'm hoping that's a rhetorical question, and you're going to tell us with a ready-made definition. I'm half joking about it, but I guess there's one of these things that's so many different perceptions and models and definitions of. So yeah, let's choose one and start with it.
Yeah. So I will say when we study humans, emotions are one of the hardest things to study. And if you've ever done any research or took a class or read anything on emotions, you'll that. So I guess a very simple definition of emotions is it's a mental reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, very simple definition.
Sure.
It's usually subjective. So our emotions, so my emotions are my reaction to something. Your emotions are your reaction to something. And we can both be on a roller coaster, or we can both share an experience of any kind and have very different reactions.
Yep. Simple and basic to start with. That's really helpful.
Now, where it gets a little bit complicated is
Already.
I always get asked, okay, so then if that's a reaction, so then what are the reactions? And you start looking at, okay, so what are the different emotions that people can have?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it gets a little bit dicey. Paul Ekman's work is probably the oldest or more concrete.
Mm-hmm.
What he talks about is the 6 basic emotions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And which are sadness, anger, fear, happiness, surprise, and disgust. Then there's another model. I can never say this person's name correctly, Robert Flut, and he introduced 8 primary emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about these emotions happening in opposing pairs. So what he says is, okay, so there's really 4 emotions, or 4 classes of emotions, and they've got an opposite to them. So 4 pairs. So what he talks about is joy and sadness, fear and anger, anticipation and surprise, disgust and trust. And in his framework, what he says is joy is about feeling connected, whereas sadness is about being withdrawn. When we feel fear, we get small and hide away. When we feel anger, we're big and loud. When we anticipate something, we lean in and try to look at it closely. When with surprise, it's more like a jumping backwards. And then disgust is about rejection, whereas trust is about embracing. So if you think about it, these are really about coming in, moving out, pulling away, pulling apart, or pulling away, coming close kind of things.
Yeah. That was really apparent in the descriptions, and the labels are really visceral descriptions.
And then in 2017, I believe it was, there was a study done, I forget the name of the university, I want to say it was Berkeley University. Apologies if I've gotten it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That actually, this study came out and said, actually, there's 27 distinct categories of emotion.
Wow.
And we won't go into that because this is not really about what are all the emotions, but I'm sharing this to go that it's a topic that's being studied, but it's a very complicated topic, and there's different views and perspectives. So if you think about it, even within ourselves, sometimes we struggle to understand our own emotions.
Yes, definitely. And if nothing else, all these different models are a step towards helping us do that.
If I had to pick a favorite, I quite like the 8 primary emotions because it talks about the opposite. So it's very easy to go, am I feeling this or this or this? That's the one that I tend to gravitate towards. But that again.
Yeah, jumping way ahead. I'll come back to what I was about to say there at the end. But Rob, I had a quick look up. Robert says Robert Plutchik, Plutchik.
Yeah.
I think, is that right? Yeah, Plutchik, not CK. Yeah, yep. And yeah, the idea that they're opposing appeals to me, as does the kind of the descriptions of how they're embodied, what you might actually physically be doing. Yeah, I love both of those things. Okay. Yeah, 27, I guess there's lots of different granularity we could go into, but like you say, that's not really what we're going to talk about today. It's more.
Look, I think the more and more research that comes out about emotions, there's probably going to be a lot more. But I think what's important is, I don't know that most of us as adults can even identify ourselves, the emotions that we're having on the 8 framework.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, funny you should say it. I think I read somewhere recently that the average person in a research study that was done, and I think it was America and thousands of adults, and the average number of emotions that people kind of used to label how they were feeling during an average day was, I think it was either between 3 and 5. If you like, the kind of emotional vocabulary of our average adult is about 3 to 5 words. And I think angry, sad, happy were the 3 most common ones.
Sometimes we're even having an emotion and we're not even aware we're having an emotion.
Okay.
That happens a lot.
At all? We'll never be aware of it, or we're aware of it, but...
Do you think that you're always aware of what your emotion is in every moment?
I'd have to say no, because I'm not fully aware of... Wow, this has gone off on a philosophical, deeply meaningful tangent, isn't it? No is the short answer to that yet. And so I agree. So that makes sense.
This is why things like self-awareness, self-reflection really come into play, right? Because sometimes we have an emotion and we behave according to that emotion, but we're not always cognizant that we have the emotion, and that's why we're behaving in that way.
Yeah, okay. So we might, I guess, if we do pause and reflect and become self-aware in the moment, we might realize we're having we're behaving in a certain way, and then start to think, why is that? And find our way in some sort of chain back to the emotion that we experienced. Yeah, okay. Yep, so that makes sense.
Okay, so we have a definition. We've gone into the complexity of emotions.
What else? We're talking about what are they good for anyway. So do we get into the why of emotions? However many there are, however many different labels we have. Why do we, Dr. Danny, why do we humans experience emotions? I was going to say have emotions. Not sure if they're the same thing.
Why do we have emotions? Do we want to talk about why do we have them, or why are they important?
Let's go with why they're important to begin with.
This is a podcast about design thinking.
Yes.
And design and emotions are very interlinked. We design for emotion. We talk about needs and pain points, and needs and pain points are really about emotions. When the need is not met, we have an emotion. When I'm trying to do something and it doesn't work, I get angry.
Yeah. And of course, the opposite is true. If we try to do something and it does work, then I become happy.
Why these are important. So one, as design thinkers, we care about emotions because it's very much aligned to why we do the work we do anyway.
Yep.
The other reason is different studies say different things, but about somewhere between 70 and 95% of decisions are made based on emotion.
70 and 95%. So that based on emotion, rather than most of us probably think that we're making a lot more than 5 to 30% of our decisions based on rational, logical thinking with emotion removed from it. So that's quite a surprising percentage to hear when you hear it for the first time.
I find this one is probably one of my favorite things when I started studying this stuff, because I remember being a young intern, and like you get mentored and all of this stuff when you're a young intern, and the big things at the time was like, there's no place for emotion in business, and you can leave your emotions at the door. And I always thought this was like, I always found this a little bit silly as a young intern. You smile and nod.
Yeah.
And then I got to the point where I started to really question it. But like humans, we have emotions. It's so intrinsic to who we are.
Yeah.
And then you look at something like, so much of our decision making is emotional. So if we leave emotion at the door,
yeah.
One, I don't think that's possible. I don't think as humans we can fully eliminate emotions from decisions. We just have to accept they're going to come into it.
Yes.
That's the we can do is have awareness.
And I think even if you are able to temporarily remove emotions from a decision, then as soon as you remove that emotion embargo, if you like, then all of a sudden those emotions are going to come back in, and you're quite possibly going to change, or at least change potentially, or at least to regret the decision that you made once you bring the emotional in. Well, that's an interesting story, Danny. I have exactly the same experience when I was the equivalent of a young intern. I was on a development program, and my mentor, I can still hear him telling me, take the emotion out of it, take the emotion out of it. And likewise, I could not understand, ironically, the logic of doing that, or I thought it was logic at the time. And here we are.
In my view, short of a lobotomy, I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, but we have been for so long, I think probably from the time of the Industrial Revolution, had this mentality that we have to take emotions out of decision making.
Yeah.
And so we come to be a society that believes that we make decisions on facts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think to some degree we consider facts when we make decisions. We're not making them blind of evidence. Consider evidence, but a lot of our decision making is emotionally driven. And there's even research that suggests that when we make decisions out of emotions, we tend to be happier with them longer. This doesn't apply to all. We can make rash, negative decisions. There is some suggestion that with some decision-making decisions that are emotionally driven tend to have higher satisfaction.
Interesting.
To bring you a concrete example, let's say you got 2 job offers, and one paid a lot more money. It was a higher level position, had very tangible things. And clearly the front runner, if you look at it from a data perspective. And the other job it paid well, but not the same amount. Maybe the title wasn't as prestigious, but that company had a lot more growth potential. You met the people that you're going to be working with every day, and you feel like it was a good fit. You really like the leader you're going to be working for. They do more interesting work. You'll have more flexibility. And which you can go with the pure numbers and make that decision. Or you can go with the, I feel this is a better fit. So if you look at that example, which do you think is going to make you happier in the long run?
Yeah, of course. It would. I assume it could be. Hopefully, it's not a trick question, but I assume that the second one, where you're feeling more of a connection to the boss and the colleagues, and there's more development opportunity, etc. Okay, 70 to 95%. Wow. Okay. Yeah. As you mentioned it before, designing for emotion. I think you said we always are, and I agree with that. But we're not always. Yes, I don't think we're always intentional enough about designing for emotion. I think we should always be paying attention to what are the emotions somebody's experiencing now before we design, and then what are they going to be feeling? What emotions are they going to be experiencing after we design and they start experiencing or using the product, service, etc. that we've used. And I think for me, the using emotion and kind of labeling specific emotions in specific moments of, let's say, a service can be a really powerful tool to imagine and then set an intent around. Do we want? So sometimes we might intentionally aim to have people feel indifferent about a particular moment in a service or experience, because indifference means that they're, or maybe satisfaction, that's a better word, it's a mere satisfaction. But what I mean by that is they don't always need to be feeling delighted or excited or enthusiastic or ebullient or any of these positive, energetic emotions we get. We might actually want them to feel a neutral emotion. But by starting to bring in emotions and labels for emotions, it helps us think through what we need to do to actually give our user the best chance of experiencing that emotion. Use those words carefully, because there's only so much we can do to help. As you said, emotions are subjective, so we can't automatically make somebody guarantee someone will experience a specific emotion. I don't think. I could be wrong.
No, we're not. We're designers. We're not master puppeteers or anything, right? At a minimum, what we could think about is, have we designed something in a way that's going to evoke negative emotion?
Mm-hmm.
Have we made this so difficult that people are just going to get angry?
Yeah.
Think about sometimes when I have to call a contact center, I am convinced they make that contact centers are designed to make me angry, so I hang up and don't follow through.
Okay.
Or things like return processes. I am convinced that some of those things, whether intentionally or not, are designed so that I attempt to do it, I get angry, and I'm like, you know what? $30 I spent is probably worth more to me just to let it go and not try to return it, because it's going to take me 10 hours to figure out how to return it.
Yes. Yeah, I started my career in call centers, so I know for a fact that actually both of those things are true. They could be, in some cases, they're definitely designed to be more challenging to accomplish something, because it's cheaper for the company for you to do it elsewhere. When it's not designed to do that and it's accidentally a bad experience, then in the end, it actually costs the company more money because you just call over and over again to try and get the problem solved. Returns is an interesting one. You maybe think of Zappos, who did the opposite to making returns difficult and actually built it into their business model and spent all their money on making it as simple and easy as possible and providing amazing support instead of spending on marketing, and became $1 billion business. So I guess maybe that's how important emotions are.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've ever been a Zappos customer. I was a big Zappos customer when I lived in the States. And it was honestly one of the reasons I shopped there is because I knew if I didn't like it, returning it would be so easy. It was sometimes easier returning it, something I bought online through Zappos than at a store.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I've never had the opportunity to be a Zappos customer, but I've heard lots of stories just like yours. Love it.
Zappos, if you're listening, come to New Zealand. We've got 2 customers.
Yeah. To start where we are in our chat, Danny, I wasn't intending that to be a mic drop moment. Didn't mean us to arrive there so soon. But so we talked about the definition of emotions, the Plutchik model, start to talk about why emotions are important in relation to design thinking. We've been talking about, I think of using emotions as almost like a tool to bring into design conversations and design activities to guide us, and also to help us understand whether our design is meeting the needs of the people we're designing for.
And it's also why we do the empathy work, right? So if we do empathy work and we start to diagram, what are people feeling? What are people thinking, feeling, doing, hearing, seeing? That all has to do with emotion, because we're trying to understand what is the emotional state of the people that we want to design solutions for, so that we're giving them the experience that they desire.
Here's a question related to something we talked about briefly earlier. Do we always want customers to be, our users, the people we're designing for, to be aware of that emotional state?
Do we want them to be aware that we've designed it for that emotional state, or that they're having that emotional response?
Both, actually. I was thinking of having that emotional response, but I'm interested in what you think about them being aware of that we've designed it that way.
I don't know that people aren't aware that things are designed to evoke emotion. Like I think we talk about that enough. Now, where this gets a little bit tricky is, so if you're doing a commercial and we're like, by the way, this commercial was designed to make you feel this way and that way, it just takes away from the experience. Or if you go to a movie and this movie was meant to scare the crap out of you.
Yeah.
So I think that people do have an inkling, if you will, that something is going to evoke a certain emotion. If I go buy flowers as a gift for somebody, I'm anticipating like, oh, grandma loves flowers. I'm going to bring some flowers over. So there is that. So I think we have an intuitive sense about that. So I don't know that we have to be explicit about it. The reason I'm hemming and hawing about it, though, is because there's a nefarious side to this, right? When we talk about designing with emotions in mind, there's lots of opportunity to be manipulative.
Okay.
And that's where this whole awareness thing, when people aren't aware, lots of people are now talking about things like dark patterns, where you're being guilted into opting into things. I've seen things like on pet websites where you can opt in, and instead of saying no thanks, it says, no, I don't really love my dogs that much. That's evoking an emotion.
Wow.
So that's where I feel like there isn't a clear answer, because there are some things where it's apparent, but it's when you get into this manipulative acts that it starts to not sit right with me.
Yeah. And this is where we start to overlap with and get into one of our favorite subjects, behavioral science, isn't it? Where we're not nudging and being very aware of and cautious of what we're doing and why we're doing that and how we're doing that.
Nudges are very misunderstood, because the ethical use of a nudge is you nudge people, but you give them a choice, right? And the choice to do it or not is equal, but you're just nudging them to make that,
slightly different to your pet website. Man, it's a shocker. Trying to guilt you into, let's stay on the emotions of that. So how does that make you feel, Danny, when you maybe guilt is one of the initial emotional responses, but what else do you feel as that guilt subsides?
This is where having a lot of knowledge sometimes, because then I get angry because I know I'm being manipulated.
Yeah.
So then I actually ended up not buying the thing that I was going to buy anyway, because now I'm just pissed off. How dare you say I don't love my dog?
I knew you were going to say that. That's why I asked you that question.
But here is the thing, though, right? This requires a lot of self-awareness on my part.
Yeah.
And it requires me to be in tune in that transaction moment to get on.
Yeah.
Because it could be that maybe it was late at night, I was ordering something. I was feeling guilty because I've been away from my dogs because I traveled for work, or I've been on a vacation, just brought them home from the kennels. And in that moment, I may be feeling guilty. And then I'm like, oh, I got to do this because.
Yeah. And maybe here's another question about emotions then, and that a picture is building a mind around your kind of your emotional state. I'm trying to say our baseline emotional state maybe changes from moment to moment. So you just mentioned there, maybe you've been away on a work trip, you come back and feeling guilty anyway, then an extra guilt-inducing piece of copy there on a website is going to amplify that existing guilt and just tip you over the edge to have your mouse button clicking on that add to cart button. So maybe what I'm trying to say there, get out there is like emotions are complex. It's unusual, or we wouldn't rarely be feeling one emotion for an interesting question. How long might we feel a particular emotion for without any overlap or interference from any other emotion? I'm going to base it on personal experiences and say probably not a particularly long amount of time before something else comes into the kind of emotional landscape or inner world.
Yeah, our emotions are not static.
That's why I was trying to say thanks for doing it in 3 words and not 300.
And if you think about it, so what is it? Our brains process something like, I think, 11 million pieces of data a second.
A second? Wow. Even a day, that's a lot of hours. Wow, 11 million.
And I might be off on that number, but it is a massive amount of data that we process in every second. So if you think about that, there's all of these things that will be triggering emotions for us, right? So it'd be virtually impossible for us to have a static emotion that exists for long. We could, but what I mean is we can switch between feeling happy and sad and having the different emotions in a day.
Yeah. Even I was going to say, even in a kind of in a minute to minute time frame, depending on what we're actually doing and being part of or experiencing. Why did I go there? I think, again, just another consideration when we're designing something is to think about that fluctuation. And again, this is where our empathetic exploration it just becomes so important, is to understand from an emotional point of view what people are experiencing moment to moment.
Yep. And I think this is where the whole idea of experience design comes into place. I walk into a store and everything's nicely folded and organized, and I walk in and it just feels a certain way. My mood is going to be very different. Now, if I walk into the store and there's just racks and racks and hangers and there's like stuff on the floor, there's stuff everywhere. It evokes different emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. And therefore, I come back to my earlier point about, so let's say I'm walking into that store and I've just come off the street, and maybe one day I've come off the street, it's outside, it's sunny, it's a nice blue sky day, and I come into the kind of the chaos of that particular store. I can cope with that chaos because my kind of baseline is at a higher level than, let's say, I come in off the street. It's been a windy, rainy day and I'm uncomfortable, and this is my sixth shop and all sorts of things have gone wrong, and I'm at my kind of, my baseline is lower, so my tolerance for that chaos is lower, and maybe I'll just walk out again because I can't cope with it.
This comes back to the awareness, right? So as the consumer, like, there are certain times or days of the week that I refuse to go to the supermarket. My work day has been such, or whatever the combination of things that happen in that day, I cannot cope with going to the supermarket. And I know that my emotional state is such that I can't cope with that.
Yeah.
From a design perspective, that's something we could be thinking about. Okay, we're going to design supermarkets. Let's think about what somebody's day has been like, and they're stopping at the supermarket at the end of the day. What is an experience that we can create so they can actually look forward to coming to the supermarket? Maybe it's the best part of their day.
Yes. Yeah, nice. Shifting it around to maybe a couple of different domains. Health, for example, how might we design experiences for patients of a healthcare service, anticipating how they might be feeling before they come into the healthcare center, for example. And banking, maybe looking at it from a different dimension, all the same situation to the store, but instead of coming in to buy a new pair of socks, the customers come in to sign up for a mortgage. It's actually quite important that that person's in an appropriate state of mind to make one of the biggest commitments of their life often. So how might we acknowledge that, anticipate that, and design something that meets them where they are and puts them in the right state of mind to have a good, memorable experience of something so important.
A hospital example, I don't know if you've heard about this, and I can't remember the name of the hospital, but little children are very much scared of MRI machines, and how they reimagined, what if we made it like under the sea? And it was like a whole experience. And from the time that the children like check in for their scan, they make it a bit of an adventure. They're still getting to do all the things that medically they need to do, but it loses the clinicalness of it.
Yeah.
And I think about like probably one of the scariest things as a woman you have to go do is get a mammogram.
Okay.
And it's a weird thing because nobody wants to go hang their body parts off of some machine.
Yeah.
But you go and you're in this hospital gown and it's just very clinical.
Yeah.
What if you made it a spa experience?
Yeah.
And it's like a spa, and you get a robe and you get a cup of tea, and so I'm sharing these as examples because we really be deliberate about, no matter where we work, we could really be deliberate about what is that experience that we want. What is that emotional state that we can help people have so that this is a good experience?
Yeah, love it. So the last Doug Dietz, I'm not sure how you say his surname. He was the engineer at GE who created those MRI experiences for children. And not only did the children prefer going to them and therefore children's health improved because of it, but GE, the profitability of those particular MRI machines, I understand, was more than the standard ones. User benefit and business benefit there. And then the last thing you mentioned about the mammograms, that's fully in the category of why has nobody done that yet, Danny? Why not make it like a spa experience? ? Okay, love it. All right, this is really great. Where are we getting to? Where are we getting to with our emotional or exploration of emotions, and they're important?
So we talked about the what, we talked about the why. We usually do what, why, how.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about how it's so looking at things that as designers, really looking at what it is that we're creating and thinking about how do we want people to feel in this moment.
We embark on our empathetic exploration. We keep our empathy kind of antennae tuned in throughout our design process. I was going to think of there's a couple of concrete things that I like to refer to, again, to do with the kind of emotional vocabulary that we need to remind ourselves often. And the two things are there's a emotional or a wheel of emotions, which is really helpful. It can help you expand your own vocabulary and also help people you're interviewing talk more about that. And then another one is it's like a catalog of universal needs and feelings. I think that comes from a place called the Center for Nonviolent Communication originally, but both of those are really simple, almost one-page tools that can just bring more awareness to what we're talking about here. One more tool that I do like to use, I've started using it more recently, is an awesome company called Riders and Elephants, and they have some emotional culture deck and also a customer experience deck that almost takes a lot of the effort out of thinking about this and doing it. So those are two recommendations from both of us, I think.
Another thing just to how to think about also is we can think about this in everyday moments. If you've got little children that hate waking up in the morning, like how can we make this a pleasant experience?
Mm-hmm.
How can we get good emotions going in the morning? Or if you're a manager, how can we make things like one-to-ones an enjoyable thing and not, I gotta go talk to my boss now. Just like lots of everyday moments where we could really be purposeful and thinking about emotion.
Yeah. Just to come back to what you were saying. Yeah, I think bringing awareness and asking the question that how might we, putting some emotional labels into our how might we questions, they can be game changers. Awesome.
And for goodness sake, stop telling people to take emotion out of it. Let's just stop that as a practice, we're humans, we have emotion, they're okay. We need to have our emotions. And also remember that earlier on you asked, why do we have emotions? And emotions actually are a very big part of why we're all still alive today.
Yes. Yeah. Literally lifesavers.
They are. Because sometimes we forget when we're about to get hit by a car, we have an emotion around that. When we're in unsafe spaces, we have emotions about that. And we have to listen to those things.
Pay attention to them. Yeah, completely agree.
Okay, so then we usually then go to what are the relevant design thinking capabilities?
Yeah, I've mentioned one already, our empathetic exploration, most definitely. One stands out, obviously. Yeah, what else?
The other one for me is situation optimizing. Has a lot to do with emotions and that balancing the negatives and the positives, and how do we keep the emotions elevated in a positive space while learning all the bad that's happening.
And maybe building on that, I think collective collaboration, because if we can tune in to understand our collaborators' emotions, then we can actually more effectively, and our own, of course, then we can more effectively collaborate.
Yep, absolutely. And keep in mind that empathetic exploration and collective collaboration are very much linked.
Nice.
So what are you taking away today, Peter?
I am taking away plot checks 8 opposing pairs of emotions and their kind of physical embodiments that you mentioned. I'm going to look into those. I'm really curious about that. How about you?
I'm going to go play around with some of the tools that you mentioned because I haven't really done much. No, spent some time with the emotional culture deck. I haven't done that in a bit. And honestly, even the emotional wheel, the wheel of emotions, I haven't tinkered with that in a while.
It's a nice compliment to the roller coaster of emotions that we experience on a day-to-day basis, Danny. Do you like what I did there?
I did.
So that was my mic drop.
On that note.
Yeah, there we go.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.